How do you realistically maintain your content creation as a busy business owner? Welcome to this week's episode of the Blunder Business Show. I'm your host, producer Jemmy. As a podcast producer, I'm often asked various questions that relate to cracking the code on audience growth. One of these common questions, as an example, is how much it matters to have a weekly show as opposed to bi-weekly or maybe even monthly. And what I often tell people in most cases is that what matters most is getting a handle on the process as a whole. And that includes not just the prep for your episode and then recording it, editing it, and publishing it, but that cycle of work also includes making sure you have and carry out a process for promoting each episode. Otherwise, if you don't ensure that based on everything you have on your plate, and that means everything in your life, not just for your show, you have to take an honest look at everything you have on your plate and decide whether a weekly release cadence that includes time to promote the show is something you can reasonably keep up with. If not, then here's what happens. You keep churning out episodes, probably see very little week-over-week lift, and you start to wonder why you're making the effort in the first place. That leads to what we hate most in this industry, pod fading, or in other words, quitting your show. So typically, I say that monthly is just about always too far apart for your episode releases, but starting out bi-weekly, getting a handle on everything, including the promotion of your episodes, creating that content to really get it out there, and then working up to weekly release is probably the best approach. The bottom line of this advice lends itself perfectly to the topic of this episode, content creation pain points, and relates broadly to any content you're creating to promote your main project, whether that is a podcast, a comic book, your printing service, your music, your car dealership, literally any type of business. If you aren't able to promote it and you don't see any growth in the numbers, you'll lose heart, you'll lose drive, you'll lose motivation, and you may end up quitting the business you're trying to build altogether. And I don't want that. So let's talk about what content pain points you may be experiencing. I probably have or am experiencing them too. For me, it's typically pain points related to the time to do it, the know-how to do it, and in some cases, the money to do it. Lead G2 lists the most common obstacles people face in content creation as including lack of clear content strategy, insufficient resources, quality and consistency issues, staying updated with trends, content distribution challenges, and measuring content ROI. Probably the ones on that list that are most applicable to me are the second, third, and fourth ones. Insufficient resources. In other words, no creative team and not enough money to hire them. Quality and consistency issues. In other words, not enough time to do it myself. And staying updated with trends. That last one is probably the most frustrating because I can see a light at the end of the tunnel for the other two. I can imagine myself hitting enough success with my business that I can eventually hire a creative team and rely on them to be consistent. But that last one, staying updated with trends, oh boy. I'm going to have to make sure that creative team isn't just able to carry out my directives, but are able to come up with ideas of their own and to stay up on all the types of content that are trending. It seems like such a high bar to achieve. As an example, Bob at Business Media Inc. says in their article, 8 Content Creation Pain Points and How to Solve Them, a very helpful article, that, quote, video now ranks second among the most used content marketing assets, with short articles and posts edging them out by just 2%. Although video is becoming increasingly important to content marketing efforts, businesses report lack of time to create content and not knowing where to start as the 2 biggest barriers to producing video content. End quote. I know personally that it can be so frustrating when the social media app or clip creation tool that you love suddenly moves functions around to different places. And now you have to relearn where stuff is, or kind of even worse, when there is a new tool altogether that is the next big and best thing to create your content with, and all of a sudden you need to figure out how to use an entire new tool just to keep up with the competition's marketing. It is exhausting, it is daunting, and it's discouraging. And if this sounds familiar to you, the good news is that you're not alone. That same article reports that in an annual survey of B2B content marketers, 71% said content marketing has become increasingly important to their organization in the last year. Yet 59% of respondents said they find it challenging to create content that appeals to different stages of the buyer's journey. End quote. And I'm including the link to this article in the show notes as well, so that you can read the entire thing. Like I said, it's very, 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 very helpful, chock full of relatable content creation pain points and tips for overcoming them. So check the show notes. Today, we're going to talk to Paul Eza, the founder of Acorn Comics. Aside from working to get his comic books off the ground, he is also a husband, father, and his full-time job is as an attorney, mediator, and litigator. So I think it's safe to say that he's a busy guy. He already has his hands full before trying to figure out how to promote his comic books. We met at our favorite local comic shop, Famous Faces and Funnies 2 in Boynton Beach, Florida, where he was set up with a table of his wares to attract comic book lovers to introduce his works to. And we got to talking and relating to each other on the matter of the drudgery and frustration that we can feel when trying to create the content to promote our stuff. But before we get around to my conversation with Paul Eza, I want to quickly mention a special bonus episode that will be out next week with my son, Jordan, who took over my hosting duties to bring you an interview with Paul Eza about his comics and about comics in general. With the focus of the show being specifically how business owners' media efforts have helped them grow, I thought it would still be fun to bring you conversations from time to time about their businesses themselves. So next week, you'll have a chance to learn more about Paul's comics. But today, it's all about content creation pain points. This episode is brought to you by Flintstone Media. Listen in. Welcome to the show, Paul Eza. It's so great to see you again. I know you're fresh off a flight to see Disney in Paris and with your wife. That must have been so much fun, but I'm so grateful that you have the time to chat with me today. And as I mentioned to my audience a moment ago, we met at Famous Faces and Funnies 2, but I didn't say how we met. So you had a table set up there with your comics, your signed art, cover prints, your talisman coins that were for sale. So first of all, how did that come about? And then what were your hopes and expectations for setting up the table at that local comic shop?
Sure. The signing at Famous Faces and Funnies 2, which is a phenomenal local comic shop here in Boynton Beach, Florida, came about when I went in. One of the first times I went in, I had noticed they had like a wall of indie comics from people like me who were making comics, kind of doing it all themselves. And I wanted to ask the owner, Jimmy, if he wanted to bring in some of my comics. My first comic, which is Heroes and Zeros, that came out last year. And Jimmy is phenomenal and a huge supporter of indie comics. And he said, sure, come on, bring some in. We'll put them up on the shelves. And he did that. And he mentioned to me that at some point, if I wanted to come in and do a store signing, an in-store signing, just let him know and we'll set it up. So I told him at that point, hey, I've got one comic out. I'm not really that confident in coming in and sitting there and with just the one thing to offer people.
Facing the public.
Right. I mean, I'm a writer. I'm not, if you've met a lot of writers by nature, most of us are very shy and awkward. I'm no exception to that. So, but once I had my second comic out, which was issue 1 of The Olympian that came out earlier this year, it's like, okay, I think I can do a few hours, friendly environment, people who are already coming in to do some comic shopping. Let's go. What's the worst that'll happen? I won't sell anything, right? I'll just sit there for a few hours and people watch. Yeah. So talked to Jimmy about it. We got it, picked a date and time, came on out, set up. And as far as expectations, I didn't really have many because I haven't done it before. I have no idea what the local interest in independent comics is. And of course, I'm not all that confident in myself as a salesman. I tend to, when I start going, you'll see this probably a couple of times today, I get going and I tend to stumble over my words a lot. So it's awkward. It's like I said, it can be very awkward. So, so it's something that I'm learning to do and learning to be better at, but I figured why not go? I'm really what I am confident in is these comics I'm making. And I know if somebody loves comic books, if they actually pick it up and give it a shot and give it a read, I think people are going to enjoy it. So I brought them out. We had some great art. Like you said, we made prints we had a main cover and 2 variant covers for each issue. And then we had one special print that we offered as part of the Kickstarter campaign. So we did prints of each cover as well, and the special print. And we had some other merchandise that went along as rewards from the Kickstarter campaigns. And so, and that was about it. So we set up, and I think Jordan was one of the first people to actually come over and talk with me. He, I could see him walking towards the back, and he kind of stopped in his tracks and looked over and was like looking at the stuff that I had there, asked me what my stuff was about.
Yeah, your covers drew us both right in. And I know you say you're not like a natural born salesman, but I think that's actually a good thing, because what you were able to do is just talk about yourself and how you wrote them and why you wrote them and where the stories came from and where the name of your main character came from for Olympians. And it was lovely just to kind of get the raw reality of why you were doing it and feel that passion right at our fingertips and be able to get to meet you. So don't get too in your head about it. I think as long as you stick to, I mean, as cliched as it sounds, it's like stick to your why, right? But I think as long as you stick to your why and keep bringing that as the forefront of the conversation, you're going to be just fine. So what were the results of it?
As far as the actual results, it was a lot better than I anticipated, frankly. I believe I sold more at that 1 4-hour block than I have in either of the 2 conventions I've been to this year. And I think part of that too is competition. You know, when you're at the convention, you're one of many independent creators who are there, who are trying to catch people's attention. You know, I'm fortunate to be in a position where I have a day job. I have income. I'm very stable, and I'm not like trying to do this as a hustle to pay my next month's bills.
Right.
If I were, I would not have succeeded in that.
What else have you been able to do to get the word out about your comics?
So besides just doing those 2 small conventions, I've got one more coming up in November. You just try and be as active as possible on social media. That seems to be the number one thing that people who have succeeded in this space will tell you, is you just have to be kind of relentless and don't worry about being annoying. It's not something I've been good at or consistent with. There's certainly people who are better at it than I am. So that's one step. I do have a newsletter that I've started that is a monthly newsletter through the website acorncomics.com. People can sign up there, or when we run the Kickstarter campaigns, there's always a question at the end when they send out the survey. Would you like to be added to our list? Would you like to be added to the newsletter? And usually I put an option of yes/already subscribed, because a lot of times people may not know, but it's not going to let me put in duplicate emails. You're not going to get 2 copies.
Right. That's actually really smart. I want to highlight that for a second, because a lot of people, if they're asked if they want to sign up for something, they may assume that they already are, not realizing that they're not, and just skip right by it and say no. But that allows you to capture them just in case they don't know. So putting that as an option of yes/I'm already subscribed means that they'll be added if they're not added. So that's a really smart idea.
Yeah, and that was something that hit me a couple of times when I was filling out surveys myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really smart. So you also do stuff on YouTube, but before we get to your trailers, which I love, you mentioned Kickstarter, which you have a Kickstarter, but you also spotlight other people's Kickstarters. So what's the thought process behind that, and how do you do that?
So one of the reasons I do that is, like, indie comics creators, it's a very big but very small community, if that makes sense. Like there's a ton of us out there, but most people who are active know each other or have interacted with each other, or are at least familiar from one thing or another. And when I started originally I wasn't sure if Heroes and Zeros would, if I wanted to just pitch that to publishers and try and get in front of an actual publisher to pick it up, or if I wanted to self-publish. And ultimately, of course, I ended up creating Acorn Comics and self-publishing through that. But if I want people to support me and help spread the word when I have a project out there, I mean, it's just kind of common courtesy to do the same thing. And so I try and do that weekly. At the beginning of this year, I thought, oh, why don't I just do this as a video on YouTube every week? And I very quickly learned that that was not a thing I was going to be able to keep up with. Between the script, the editing, the filming, everything.
Yeah.
Even though it was only going to be like a 60-second clip each week, the work that went into it was just not something I was able to keep up with. So I very quickly switched back to the format I had been using, which is just, again, going on the various social media platforms and trying to highlight 3, occasionally 4 projects that were funding at that time. Usually ones that I'm backing or would like to back.
Yeah.
So as many of those as I can help in any small way become reality, I want to do it.
Yeah, of course, of course. And then you've also done a couple of your own trailer videos that are on YouTube.
Yes.
And you've also been a podcast on, not just on this podcast, but you've been a guest on other podcasts.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to check those out, you can find them at acorncomics.com/media.
And I should say, since I am the entirety of the Acorn Comics staff, I'm a little behind at updating that page. So there are a couple that I have not yet put up there because honestly, I always forget that I have to update that page.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I totally feel you. So that's actually a phenomenal segue to the next part of this conversation, because I know that you studied advertising in your undergraduate career in college, but you have the same content creation pain points that so many of us have, like the time to do it, the money to create things can come into play. So it's a lot. But when it comes to time to do it yourself, I mean, you do have that full-time job. You're an attorney, you're a mediator, you're a litigator. You also, well, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Young son, who I look forward to meeting one day, who your main character in Olympian is named for. Plus, there's obviously the side hustle of creating these comics and nurturing their growth and managing the Kickstarter and blah, 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 like all the things, right? So how can anyone expect you to have time to promote the content? Like what you were saying with doing the Kickstarter videos, it takes time to script it, to record it, to edit it. Like all of that takes time. So can you describe I may have just done it, but can you describe your own pain point of having the time to do promotional content for your own stuff?
Well, it's, I think, twofold.
Mm-hmm.
Time is obviously one of them, and that's a big one. And I prefer, if I have spare time from all the other parts of life, I would much rather spend it writing another comic. You know, I've got probably, other than, we've got Heroes and Zeros 2 coming out soon. We've got issue 2 of the Olympian that's in the works already. And I'm focusing on those 2 series primarily to get the first runs of those 2 finished before I move on to one of the other projects. But I've got at least a start on 2 or 3 others that I think are very promising that I really want to dig into at some point. But besides the time, there's the skills. And obviously, when I was in college, there was no training on any of this. There was none of that. So there's certain skills I had as far as a design aesthetic, as far as how to put things together that I still carry with me. And I think that has served me well enough putting together the trailers that you mentioned and just seeing how it works and how I want to put it together and finding the right music and cutting the music at the right spots and all that kind of stuff. That I actually kind of enjoy, but I had to learn how to use that software. I just use the iMovie that comes with my Mac. I'm sure there's better software out there that would allow me to do more of the things that I maybe have in my head for some of these, but none that I know how to use. And none of it that is free that is specifically better. So I'm not necessarily willing to pay money at this point to try to see if I can make something a little bit better. I might get to that point at some stage, but for now, I'm happy with what I've been putting out for the trailers, so I'm good with that. Getting attention on social media is another skill entirely. And it is one that I have yet to crack the code.
It's so difficult sometimes to stay on top of what's going to work, what's new. There's constant change as to how to work the algorithm, what's going to work, what's going to hit. And being able to stay up on all of that technology, not only just the tools of how to make it, what are all the buttons and features and things that you can do, but then brainstorming how to stand out from the crowd, having different campaigns for different purposes and whatnot. It can be a lot. So you've mentioned, yes, time is definitely a big factor. Staying up on things is another big factor. And then also the money, because you mentioned the technology, like having the cash flow to either pay someone who is an expert at social media to do things for you, or B, to have the software that you're paying for yourself be at a upgraded level that can do all the things. It can be really, really daunting. And I think those are the three main pain points that most content creators have. It's a time issue, it's a money issue, and then it's a technology learning curve issue. And so what you're saying is extremely, extremely familiar. And one of the ways that people are staying on top of things and doing them is by using something you and I have talked about in the past and feel very similar on: AI. On one of our recent calls, we discovered that we have some of the same concerns. In fact, my last episode was with a man named Ulrich Musset. He is the founder of Marbleism. It's this one type of AI that creates AI assistants for you and stuff. But what are some of your thoughts on you using AI potentially to do some of this content creation and help getting the word out? How do you feel about just the idea of it?
All right. Well, as you and I discussed, I am vehemently anti any kind of generative AI. And there's a lot of layers to that and why I feel that way. But what it comes down to, of course, this is a huge issue in any kind of publishing or any kind of entertainment, but particularly with comic books, because the art and the words all work together in such harmony to create this, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And part of that and part of what makes it so good is the collaboration between different people, because you get different viewpoints and different takes on things that you might not get otherwise. AI, the models that are out there, I'm not going to mince words on this. They are plagiarism machines. They do nothing but steal copyrighted works from people who've not given them permission to do so and repurpose them into something that they claim is new, but is just a mashup of other people's work. It's there to try and take away work from, it boggles my mind how little people actually value artists. Writers are artists. Yes. I'm talking about visual artists, people who can actually draw a picture that tells a story. And people are like, oh, that's wonderful. That's so great. You must be rich. You want me to pay what for that?
Right.
And there's absolutely no actual appreciation for the people who are doing this work and creating these beautiful things.
Right. Because you're not just paying for the one painting, you're paying for all of their hours and years of studying, of practicing, of all the supplies that it took to make various versions or what have you. It's a lot, and people just take it for granted. You're right.
And I have a lot of friends and a lot of creators I might not have met, but that I greatly admire, who, if you look through some of the lawsuits that have been making their ways through the courts, they've been stolen from. And that doesn't sit well by me.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of Scarlett Johansson and what she recently went through. And she's done a lot of work, but what she's probably best known for is playing Black Widow in the MCU movies. And I forget the company, but they were basically doing an AI voice model, and they reached out to her, say, hey, can we use your voice? And she said no, and they did it anyway. And so imagine how that would feel to have essentially your voice stolen from you. Actually, I can imagine a little bit. Because when I was in 8th grade, my school used to do this thing where you could submit art to be included in their calendar that they would put out every year. And I don't know if I submitted anything that year or not, but I remember turning the pages of the calendar when it finally came out and seeing this big photo for one of the months and being like, wait a minute, that looks extremely familiar. Oh, not a photo, a drawing. Like, that looks really familiar. And I realized I had drawn it. I had drawn it, but somebody else had submitted it under his name. And so the feeling that happens when you get your work stolen from you, it can be devastating and very, very frustrating, because once it's out there, then it's just like this catch-up game of awareness to try to let people know that, no, this is really you. It's one thing for you to say, hey, Google, can you help me figure out what this definition is or what made this person's work significant? It's another thing entirely to say, hey, AI, can you please write my college essay or a comic book in the style of so-and-so? And so sometimes there's a fine line and sometimes there's a big, bold line. And I think when it comes to creating something, and I say something similar to this on this episode with Ulrich, if you get something back from AI and it couldn't have come from you, your own brain, then it shouldn't come from you. You know, it's one thing to use it as a tool to help you get some words out, but if it couldn't have come from you, it shouldn't come from you. And I think that's even triple, quadruple fold when it comes to something that's very creative, like drawing or writing a book. So I completely understand how you feel.
And let me put it this way. Like, I can theoretically envision uses of that technology that I don't think are ethically bad.
Compromised, yeah.
Yeah, right. Then,
wait, not to cut you off, but did you see that there was a court case where this guy actually had an AI-generated lawyer and the judge was not having it? He's like, no, we are not doing an AI-generated lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Unbelievable. Go ahead.
It really is. It's ridiculous how some of this stuff goes. And again, and getting it, because this does overlap with my day job a little bit, but I think you and I are similar age, so you probably remember the Napster lawsuits.
Yes. Oh, yes, I do.
And to me, this is no different than that. And
yeah, essentially, if anyone's not familiar, what you could do with Napster is you could upload your own, the CD that you bought and have the different songs up there. And so could everybody else across the world. And what you could also do is then search for a song that you really wanted. And instead of going to the store and buying the single or buying the album, you could just download it from Napster. And
absolutely
for
free. As a college student, boy, did I love that.
I'm not gonna lie either. I loved it. I mean, there were times when you'd have to sit there and this is really dating us, but like it would take like an hour or an hour and a half to download something, but it was worth it because it was free. And we didn't really think about the impact that was having on the artists. But once people brought it up, it did make us think through that a little bit more.
It makes sense because artists should be able to survive on their art. If you're good enough, you should be able to make a living. If you want great art, you have to be able to pay the artists so that they can keep making great art.
Right. And just as a reminder for everybody, next week we're going to have a bonus episode for you that features an interview about Paul's comics. And actually, it's being done not by myself, but by the total comic geek in the house, my son, Jordan. And there is a fun fact. It was something you did on our guest intake form. It was a fun fact that I thought, ooh, I want to hear more about this. And I don't think it was covered in the interview with Jordan. So you mentioned as a fun fact that you are a character in both DC Comics and the Star Wars universe. Like, what's that about?
Yeah, so I'll start with the DC Comics. Although my wife will argue about this one, and in fairness, she's right. But the very first appearance was at one point, I don't remember which issue of Batman this was. But one of our good friends, Tom King, was writing Batman for several years, and he had somebody as a patient in Gotham General Hospital, and there was an announcement that went over. Someone said, "Somebody call neurology. Somebody get Dr. Eza down here." Of course, my wife being a neurologist, that's who he was referencing. But that's not her name. You never changed her
Look at
name.
you trying to steal your wife's shine. Look at you.
But the name's in there. So
I love it.
And then the second time in Tom's run, there was an issue. It was issue 75 of Tom King's Batman run. And the artist on that one was another friend of ours, Mitch Garrett's, who had reached out to us and said, hey, I just need some reference photos of the two of you together looking scared. Like, okay. Okay.
And interesting request.
This, as another kind of side fun fact, this was when Constance was pregnant with our son, and we were just about to make the like official to the world announcement. Like our families knew, but not everybody knew.
Yeah.
And we did consider for a minute asking Mitch to draw her pregnant as our way of announcing it. But then we realized that this was probably going to be a very dark thing. And so there's a panel towards the back of issue 75 where you see myself and Constance in the background as Victor Zsasz walks by, most likely about to kill us. So that part's not shown. So that's just...
Hence the look scared.
Right. Right.
That's awesome. And what about the Star Wars thing?
So the Star Wars thing goes back to something I know you and I have discussed a little bit in our calls. The Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. There's this immersive theater. It kills me to say this, but this is how it got to be known publicly, was the Star Wars Hotel. That's not what it was. But that's how most people know it. It was the Star Wars Hotel at Disney World. It was a 2-day fully immersive experience where you basically get dropped in the middle of a Star Wars adventure. And we have been told by multiple sources through Disney, Lucas, etc., the events on the Galactic Star Cruiser are Star Wars canon. So we, as characters who attended in character on the ship,
it counts.
It counts. You know what? It counts. I am a Star Wars character. You can't tell me otherwise.
I love it so much. And one other thing I'd like you to share real quick is you have a Kickstarter campaign coming up at hzcomic.com. That's for Heroes and Zeros, I assume?
It is. hzcomic.com. It's issue 2 of Heroes and Zeros. This is, again, 48 pages of story, no ads. And for anyone who hasn't read it yet, you can get a copy on our website. If you have a Global Comics subscription, Acorn Comics is on Global Comics, so you can read it there. Or if you're just getting caught up to it and you want to order an extra copy of issue 1 when you support issue 2 on the Kickstarter, you can do that too. We still do have enough stock, and shoot, if there's that many folks ordering it, then I'll just do another print run. I'll make sure we have enough. So I'll be more than happy to do it. So yes, it's for issue 2 of Heroes and Zeros. It's our futuristic murder mystery. We call it X-Men meets Scooby-Doo in the future. So that's where the adventure comes from. Definitely underdog story and against all odds type of story.
Yeah, and I've read the first issue, and I love the groundwork that you've laid for it. I love the characters, and I can't wait to read number 2. So I do encourage anybody who is even, a comic book fan, interested in what comic books are about. If you remember reading Scooby-Doo as a kid, like whatever the reason, like, or just want to, support our awesome guest here, Paul Eza, definitely go to hzcomics.com or hzcomic, no S, hzcomic.com and throw some support to his Kickstarter.
I should say right now it's in pre-launch, so it's not up there yet. So go to hzcomic.com. You can go there now and sign up to follow the campaign. And then when the campaign launches, the minute it launches, you're going to get an email that says, this is live, go support it.
Fantastic. Okay, so then other than the bonus episode that we have coming out next week where you're interviewed by Jordan about your comic books, and other than hzcomic.com where people can go and support you, sign up for your Kickstarter, how else can people find, follow, and support you?
All right, so I am Acorn Comics on Threads, on Facebook, on Instagram, On Blue Sky, it's EZA. So my last name, ESQ, like a lawyer, is the username because I haven't figured out how to change that yet. When I opened the account, I didn't know if I was going to be using it for law, for comics, for what.
Right.
Definitely shifted towards comics. And those are the ones that I primarily use. Obviously, it's Acorn Comics on YouTube, and that's where we're at.
And we'll put links in the show notes to everything.
Please come follow us. Come say hi. We love to interact.
Awesome. Well, I said it, gosh, I don't even remember what episode it was. So I was talking about networking and always being ready to network because you never know what awesome opportunities are going to avail themselves to you. And
like somebody coming up to you at a comic book shop.
Yeah, to meet you at the shop. And we had a great conversation. And Paul, thank you so much for all of your time today. It's been really, really fantastic speaking.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jemmy.
So welcome to my sticky note quickie for this week's Blender Business Show. Let's talk specifically about finding the time to create content, because I believe if you can crack that egg, then you'll create content consistently enough and well enough to begin making an impact on your business's growth, increase sales, and then be able to flip some of those additional dollars into better content. Hire a team that can increase your quality, better target your right audience, and dare I say, even be able to create separate content funnels for different points in your sales cycle? Yes, please. So let's crack that pain point of time. At least let me tell you how I have managed to get better at it. It boils down to two main efforts. Number one, sequestering time for creating promotional content. And number two, putting up guardrails to protect that sequestered time from distractions. So, number one, sequestering time for creating promotional content. On Fridays, I have a 4-hour block of time dedicated to content creation. Full stop. It's blocked off on my calendar, and I typically have created a running list over the course of the week of content ideas for me to tackle. And that brings us to number two, which is a little more complicated. Putting up guardrails to protect that sequestered time from distractions. I'm a mom of a 13-year-old kid named Jordan, who you will meet in next week's bonus episode as a reminder. And I have my business, which includes both team members and clients who all reach out to me for one thing or another. Plus, I have other people in my life who I adore and want to spend time with, such as my partner Patrick and my best friend Viviana. So life is definitely a delicate balancing act already. And one of the best favors I ever did for myself to create an impact on my productivity generally was utilizing a scheduler tied to my calendar. You may have heard of a very popular software in this space called Calendly. I happen to use a different one called Schedule Once, but all of these kinds of softwares work essentially the same. They connect to your calendar, you set up certain rules for your availability, and when you need to offer a meeting time to somebody, you simply send them your calendar link, and then they can pick whatever day and time works for them within your pre-established parameters. And that's the key. You can set up the parameters, i.e., boundaries on your availability. And that leads me to the second best favor I ever did for myself to impact my productivity. I recognize that my Mondays are super busy, packed with podcast production tasks for me to handle. Not necessarily editing, but overseeing the overall operations of our production queue. So a few years ago, I decided to block my Mondays from any calls or meetings being scheduled, period. Essentially, it's a day when I can completely buckle down and focus on the tasks at hand. That way, things that affect the core of my business don't bleed into the rest of my week, and I can continue to be as productive and distraction-free as possible for Tuesday through Friday as well. And that, of course, circles back to the first main effort towards finding time to create content, sequestering time for creating promotional content on Fridays, as that time is now protected from the potential of distraction. At least as much as it can be. And no, this is not a perfect system. Some things will still seep into my protected content creation time despite my best boundaries and efforts. Like this weekend, not only did I have a blown tire, but we also had a leaky pipe. So I've had to fit in car appointments and plumbing service appointments. It's been a hot mess. So things happen, right? But for the most part, it holds. And that's been so good for me and my content. I guess it really boils down to being intentional. One, being honest about how much time I have in my week to dedicate to the full cycle of my business, which has to include time to promote it, both my podcast production house, Flintstone Media, and this show, The Blender Business Show. Then, two, deciding I need to spend X amount of time on my content to achieve my goals for it. And three, both setting aside that time and protecting that time. And in my research for today's sticky note, I also came across an article from Column 5 titled, How to Fix the 10 Most Common Content Creation Mistakes. And I found its list to be super illuminating. It talks about common content creation mistakes, such as creating what you want, not what people need, and also forgetting your brand. So I'm including the link to that article in the show notes for you, of course. And once again, just another quick reminder, be sure to catch our bonus episode for you next week that features Paul being interviewed by my son, Jordan. What's so great about that interview is that not only do you hear them geek out about comic books, but Paul's story about turning something he loved in his childhood into a dream for his adulthood is pretty inspiring. It's a great story for any fellow entrepreneur turning a dream into a reality. Here's a quick clip.
Explain to me, what is Heroes and Zeros? What is this comic book that I'm holding in my hands right now?
All right, so Heroes and Zeros is the very first comic book I ever wrote. Mm-hmm. This was the one that when I decided I want to do this, I want to write comic books. This is the first story I developed and started typing out. The kind of log line for it is X-Men meets Scooby-Doo in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think now you've read it, you probably can see some of those elements. Like you've got, people have evolved to develop superpowers, except now most people have superpowers. The Zeros from the title are the ones who are in this future that don't have any powers. And so then we get into the Scooby-Doo element, which is that it is a murder mystery focused on 3 Zeros who are trying to solve the murder of the most powerful man in the world.
This week's episode was brought to you by Flintstone Media, my podcast production house and consultancy firm, and Marbleism. If you want to learn even more about Marbleism and its ability to ethically help you cut down on the busy work of building your business and focus on just your creative lens, check out our blog post at flintstonemedia.com/blog. And next week, be sure to catch our bonus episode about comic books, the comic book biz, and comic book culture. And as always, you can get more details and show notes about today's show, connect with our featured guests, and join us on social media by going to blenderbizshow.com. So what happens when you blend creative content into your business? I'm producer Jemmy, and I look forward to bringing you those valuable ideas and great stories every week on the Blender Business Show. We are the Blender community, where business and media mix.